and save this. So hello, awesome authors. It's good to be with you today. I am going to share some practical steps with you with how you can get started with writing your book. We had a question this week from one of the members of our group about how to start. Where would you start if you haven't yet started your book? So it was wonderful, actually. This week I got to interview Ella Lagan on her new book. If you haven't checked out that interview, please go and have a listen. She has written an incredible children's book, and it was just wonderful to get to share her experience with everyone, and also to hear more about her book. And one of the things that she mentioned is actually how a strong outline helps her to not get distracted, because as a creative person, which many authors are, it's very difficult to stay on task. And when you have a really strong outline, it's a great place to start. It will keep you focused and it will help you overcome writer's block. You won't feel like you're stuck. And you know, sometimes when you try and write the book and you just start writing, when you don't have a clear structure, then you need to go back usually. So say you've written your book for a little bit and you get distracted with something and you've got to come back to the manuscript. Then you've got to spend a lot of time actually going through that manuscript again to find out where you were at, to pick up the pieces and to start again. But with a very strong outline, you don't have to do that. It does the hard work for you. So if you take enough time to build your outline, and to make it nice and clear, crystal clear, you know exactly what you're doing and where you are going with that outline and with your book. It takes so much effort and so much hard work out of that writing process. The writing process then becomes so much easier. So I thought what I'd do today is share with you my process for my book. The new book I'm working on, book number 7. It is titled How to Be Epic at Failing. That's a working title. It might change, but it's a message that's been on my heart for a long time. So what I will do is I'm going to share that. I'm going to share my screen with you and share the document and share with you what I have done so far. Let me just find the right place. There we go. Okay. Let's see if I can make that view one page. Yeah, instead of all the pages. Okay. So the first thing you really want to ask yourself is, what am I trying to communicate to the reader? And to try and get that down into one specific sentence. Now, I know this makes a lot of authors very nervous because they have so much in them to share. And when I wrote Untangled, I know I've shared it so many times, but when I wrote Untangled, my first manuscript, the first version, I poured out my entire life, everything I knew, every Bible study I've ever done, every sermon I've ever prepared for. I poured everything into that book. And it was quite overwhelming. And even though it was my story, and all of it was good, all of it was powerful, it was very overwhelming. So can you imagine meeting somebody for the first time and you tell them your entire life story? That would be super overwhelming. Now, as a first-time author, I was nervous because I was thinking, will I ever get the opportunity to share all of this wonderful stuff with people again? Because in my mind, I thought there's only one book. Boy, was I wrong. Okay, so I'm busy writing book number 7. And, you know, there is so many more opportunities to write about things and to share things. You don't just have one book in you. So instead of thinking about you writing your story and giving people the information that you have gained over many, many years, the important thing is really to think about what is it that the reader needs to receive from me in, you know, what is it that they are looking for? Now, I know one of the messages, or one of my life journeys, is really about how to embrace failure, how to take failure and make it work for you. So I wanted to focus on that. And in fact, that was one of the chapters in my book Untangled, where I was specifically sharing about this particular topic. But I knew that I had so much more to share, and that there was a message within that little piece of my book. So when I sat down last week to do the outline for my book, I thought about that. What is the one thing, just one thing, I want the reader to walk away with when they finished reading my book? And that was, I wanted them to know how to take the pain out of failure and to turn it into purpose. So that is the only thing I want them to know at the end of reading this book. Then I started thinking about, what does that look like? So if I was having a coffee with somebody who was really in a bad state, they had made a huge mistake in their life, what is that process that I would take them through? So this is how I kind of mapped out that conversation. The first thing I wanted to tell them is, let's just have a listen to what failure is saying to you. So my chapter 1 is really, what is it that failure says? So I've titled it When Failure Speaks. So really what I have in mind is that person who needs to pay attention to what their thought patterns are as they sat in the coffee shop. What is it that they're experiencing? What is it that they are feeling? And it's all that stuff that I covered in my course, The Born to Write Blueprint, where it looks at what are the pain points that they are feeling? How is this failure affecting them on all these different levels? Okay, so I made like a little list here about what failure is saying. But I'm going to go back to the detail of that chapter in a minute. I just want to give you a quick overview first. So chapter 1 is When Failure Speaks. So I'm sitting with them in chapter 1. I'm sitting with them where they are. In chapter 2, I'm going to tell them about the power of hope. So I'm going to tell them what is possible. And again, I might still tweak the title of that chapter, but I want to give them hope. I want to give them something that will lift up their eyes. At this stage, I don't want to tell them what to do. I just want them to consider the possibility of, you know, what is possible with God and with hope. Then the second part of that, the third chapter, I'm going to tell them what the pathway is to purpose. So what does that journey look like? How do we get out of the pit and walk towards that hope that we're seeing? In chapter 4, so this is now where it gets interesting. I'm just gonna, don't know why I didn't highlight that chapter 4, but so in chapter 4, I'm starting to hone in on each individual lie that failure is telling that person. Okay, so if you go back to chapter 1, I have told them that this is what failure is telling you. Failure is saying that you're stuck, you're unqualified, you're on your own. Don't you dare to dream. There is no hope for you. You don't have what it takes, and this is not for you. So this is what failure is saying. But let's take what failure is saying and let's turn it into purpose. So we're going to turn the first one into you're stuck, into you are not at square one. The second one, that you're disqualified, that you are called and qualified. The next one was that you are on your own. No, you are part of a heavenly partnership. Don't you dare to dream? No, you have permission to dream and you can be dream driven. Okay, so then so that's the overall structure. So that's what I'm going to do with my book. Now, I might still go back and I might go and add an introduction and a conclusion bit at the end. I like to do that kind of thing after I've written the bulk of the book, because it's almost like the introduction is going to be a opening letter to that reader. And then my conclusion is going to be my last thoughts on how to make this work for you, how to live it every day, that kind of thing. That's what I did with Untangled. Okay, so I hope that's starting to make sense. I feel like I'm talking a lot, and when you don't get feedback, it's difficult to know that people are following and that it's resonating or making sense. Right, so now that I know my one thing that I'm going to share with my audience, I know the journey that I'm going to take that audience on, from being in the pit to lifting up their eyes and starting to walk out of the pit and looking towards what is possible. Now I'm going to look at what each one of those chapters are going to look like. So you don't have to go into a massive amount of detail when you map out your structure. The detail can come later. All I am interested in at this point before I start is to really just have a little structure in my head of how I want the reader to journey throughout each chapter. Because what you want to do is you want to answer that overarching problem about taking the pain out of failure and turning it into purpose. So that's my overarching theme. You want to answer that question in every single chapter. You want to make it practical, and you want to give the reader an answer and some practical tools that will answer that question. So this is what I'm asking myself in every chapter. Am I answering this particular question? Okay, so in chapter 1, I look at an epic failure. So I actually look at the life of Peter and his betrayal of Jesus. I share some of my epic failures. Then I look at generally, what does failure say to us as in general, to people in general? And then I make it specific. What is failure saying to you? So my structure within my structure, the structure for my paragraphs is Peter's failure, my failure, generally, what does failure say to us? And lastly, what is failure saying to you? And this is a pattern that I then repeat throughout every chapter. So chapter 2, the power of hope, I talk about Peter, who is unable to see what's happening around him, and Jesus standing on the shore because he is condemned or guilty or feels shame. Then I talk about how condemnation has kept me blind. Then I generally talk about how hope allows us to see. And then I ask the reader, what are you seeing with the eyes of your heart? Then again, I do the same for the pathway to purpose. So I look at Peter's story of restoration, how Jesus restored him. Then I look at my redemption story of how Jesus used my failure to help other people. And then I share my strategy, a general strategy that anybody can apply. And then I challenge the reader with asking them, will you accept this invitation? What are the steps that you are going to take? Then once I start to answer some of those questions, my structure is very structured, the buzzword for the day, but I change it up a little bit, just in the sense that I don't go into Peter's story or my story as much, but for the rest of the book, where I'm actually tackling the lies, I look at what is the lie, what is the truth, how do you apply the epic strategy, and then I end it with a challenge. And that's what I'm going to do for every chapter going forward. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. So I would really love to know what you think. Is that helpful? Would that help you with starting your book? When you can define that question of what is the problem that I'm solving for my reader. For a non-fiction book, that is the golden question that you want to answer before you sit down and write your book. I just want to say as well, with the answering the call to write workbook, I do take you step by step through that process of thinking it through. So what is the message that's written on your heart, the one that you are born to write? Okay, that thing that makes you so passionate about. So if you're not sure what that is, or what part of that message you want to write about in this particular book that you're starting to write, then I would say this is really the place to begin, is asking yourself, what is the message that I am carrying for my reader right now? And then defining that, kind of putting it into one simple sentence that you can ask yourself as you map out your book. Am I answering this question? In this chapter, in chapter 1, am I answering this question? In chapter 2, am I answering this question? Because that'll make your writing super, super clear. Okay, so in this workbook, I also take you through a process of really looking at who you are writing to, because that is so important. And it helps not only with writing a book that is clear and that's going to connect to people, but it also helps with your marketing messaging. When you're putting your social media content out there, if you can clearly identify the pain points that that person is experiencing. So for example, the place where I started was really thinking about, what is failure saying to you? You know, what is this pain that you're experiencing? What is it making you believe? So I'm meeting the reader right in that place of pain where they are sitting, because a lot of the time what we do is we write books and we come with a lot of information and we say, look at all this awesomeness. Look what God did for me. Look at my amazing testimony. And it is amazing and it is good and it is powerful. But for that person who's sitting in the pit of despair, they will sit there and go, well, Meliza, that is great for you. I am so happy for you. But this is so far removed from where I am. So you have to actually go and meet people where they are in that place of pain. And when you really understand where they are and you write from that perspective, you write from really seeing that person in the coffee shop, you ministering to them, speaking into them, that's when things really start to come alive and the writing becomes easy because you know who you're writing to. So knowing what the message is that you want to bring, knowing who your person is that you are writing to, and then knowing the journey that you want to take them on. I cannot tell you how important that is. If you have a clear step-by-step plan of how you're going to take someone from the pit of destruction to the place of hope, or the place of freedom, the place of truth, whatever that looks like. If you can map it out and say, okay, step 1 is this, step 2 is this, you've got your framework, then sitting down to write your book is going to be so easy. I started last week, and by some miracle, I'm already 2,000 words into chapter 1. So, once you've got that structure, you will just go with the flow. So I hope that was helpful. I also have the Born to Write course. I've put the workshop, made it available. I'll put the links for the workbook and for the workshop in this post. And hopefully that can help you. If you're really stuck and you don't know where to start, these tools are really good to help. Okay, have an awesome week, and I hope you've set some awesome goals. Remember, any progress is better than no progress. So just taking a little step forward, you will get to your dream and your goal of publishing the beautiful and awesome message that you were born to write. Love you. Bye.